Thanks for coming out, guys. So as mentioned, co-founder, chief product officer of Neura. We're working on something called the Sovereign Stack that I'll get into kind of later on. But really a high-level L1 focusing on stables and DeFi. But to start with, and kind of an overview of, I have a background from the Anchor team in RPCs and infra of Onchain and supporting many networks. So kind of how I view the next era of blockchains, mostly around sustainable economics and sovereign infrastructure. So where we're at today for kind of the current state of the market, we're starting to see a shift and focus back to actual fundamentals and not just pure speculation. So, especially over the last month or so, altcoins and L1s remaining highly volatile, liquidity being fragmented across dozens of ecosystems. I think there's been a lot of talk and focus on interop, at this conference for good reason, because we do have that fragmentation. And lastly, narrative fatigue of the constant shifts. I think we're starting to see some long-term consistent narratives on the stablecoin and DeFi side, especially as TradFi comes into the space. But we're moving beyond just Twitter followers, Discord members, into actual things such as revenue generation for networks. So kind of what I call the rise of revenue meta, shifting away from just pure ecosystem growth at any cost and actually coming back to business fundamentals. A similar shift that we saw in Web 2, where we have finally maturing Web 3 projects that are eventually kind of converging on not only how they monetize, but how they're capturing value across their stack. And the kind of converse side of that is how we prevent value leakage as well, especially if you're an ecosystem play. So being judged not just on how many followers you have, but like I said, the fees you're actually generating as an ecosystem. If you're having a stable coin, the interest in it, and also the distribution. And then a large part, that we're focusing on at Neura, especially that I think will continue to grow, is infrastructure-driven revenue and the benefits of kind of participating and having control over every aspect and every layer for your ecosystem in general. We have some kind of, big numbers with pump fund and Hyperliquid there, 690, 550 million, and this is actual revenue generated for the last year. So kind of hard to read here, but you have top 10 projects and their revenue generated. 2 out of the top 3, we have stable projects, Tether and Circle, but right below that, we have Pump Fund and Hyperliquid, even above Ethereum. So we see projects that kind of, you need 2 things, either large backing partners or actual real users. And we're seeing this with product market fit, with Pump and Hyperliquid coming to market with a great product first, and then kind of scaling the ecosystem after. And this is what I believe in will lead to verticalization. So industry-wide trend here, we've seen, apps that scaled on top of Ethereum or even Base, and they actually want more control of their economics themselves, whether it's a custom gas token or having sequencer fee value caption to the benefit of their community and their application. Then we have L1s kind of now exploring and launching native stablecoins, and instead of using other issuers, once again, kind of controlling not just the stack, but also the economic value as it transports through it. And then over the last 2 years, I think people are really starting to pay attention to MEV as a large value leakage point. So we have like Flashblocks and other projects that are working with networks to kind of recapture this and sustain that value within ecosystems. And lastly, app chains and other folks, as I mentioned, working on interop solutions, and really if there's liquidity flowing through the stack, including with other networks, they want a piece of the pie. So all this why for verticalization is owning more of the stack so that you can capture the value, hopefully in a healthy way, to support the longevity of your project. So this leads us to what we're doing with Neura, kind of as the full stack approach and what we're calling the sovereign stack. And what we mean by that is, yes, it is a actual physical network that's purpose-built for stables, DeFi, and institutions. And what I mean by kind of sovereign stack is that we actually have hardware that is around the world that we own, so bare metal servers that are connected by private fiber, and Neura as an L1 network that sits on top of that. So having ownership and control of the hardware layer, the data layer, as well as the network layer comes with many benefits. Of course, if you're familiar with like 00 and what they're doing for Solana validators, kind of similar concept at the hardware level. So higher performance, lower latency, increased bandwidth. But on top of that, we're really working on things like aggregated liquidity and sustainable economics for the long term. So that's where the native reserve comes in, that I'll touch on in a little bit. Pretty much it's one-to-one backed of Genius compliant stables and yield-bearing stables for USN, which is our eco stable. And then lastly, monetized infra. So this is something that I'll touch on a little bit more, but things like RPCFi, OEV, MEV, and vertically integrated apps allow us to capture that value. So for the tech stack and where we're at today, we're actually in public testnet. So we have in the green here below, you see where we have our bare metal servers in 12 cities, 7 countries, 4 continents, connected by private fiber. We do plan to expand, including areas such as South America, to continue to lower latency and expand bandwidth. But this is kind of the lower level of the full stack or verticalization approach that we're taking, and to the long-term benefit of the economics and also those that we support with Neura, which leads to kind of our overall growth and ways that we plan to bring to market high yield opportunities, but that are not just solely based and backed up by emissions, but actual real recurring revenue streams. So we're focused on kind of 6 fields initially here. RPCFi, we're building in partnership with Anchor. At the highest level, you can think of this as paid RPC calls turning into DeFi liquidity on top of Neura. And I'll touch a little bit on the specifics of how that happens in a couple of slides. Otherwise, we have typical things like gas fees, our full reserve with USN, so the spread and the benefits of distribution of your own stable that is also neutral and kind of works with other issuers as well to aggregate liquidity. Then we do have flagship applications, so core DeFi ones that you can imagine, like CDP, PerpDex, V native DEX, et cetera, that we have rev share that once again contributes to the overall participants of the ecosystem as a whole. And one other unique thing outside of RPCFi that we're really excited about is OEV and MEV. We're actually partnering with Redstone to be the first one to implement chain level OEV. And if you're unfamiliar, that's Oracle extractable value. So kind of, you can think of it like a subset of MEV, and pretty much if any liquidation event occurs, so say, a liquidation event on the native PerpDex, typically external searchers or snipers will come in, bid for, say, $100 of value, $99 to win one, and this is an automated process that happens thousands of times a second. So all that value is then captured and then typically taken out of the ecosystem by parties that specialize in this. By doing chain level OEV, we're actually able to step in ourselves and capture that value in a healthy way to redistribute it back to either chain owned liquidity or to top up the LP incentives on our native DEX. And lastly, since we are an L1, we have roll up as a service, can launch L2s and have some share on the sequencer fees there as well. All this said, though, RPCFi especially kind of being the leading one, these are real revenue streams from a typically traditional payment space in Anchor and RPC services that will be available day one for mainnet launch with Neura. and kind of double clicking on what we're doing with the stablecoin reserve and USN. So as a reminder, USN is one-to-one backed by kind of a basket of Genius compliant and yield-bearing stables. So the focus on aggregating liquidity and working directly with other issuers, creates a smooth experience on what we're calling the sovereign rail. So USN has two main utilities that I would touch on. One being the native gas token that also has gas-free transfers within Neura. So really creates a smooth experience and simple for onboarding and offboarding different stable types. The second utility would be high yield opportunities with USN on our native DEX. And this is attractive, targeting double digits, especially if you're coming in with Genius compliant ones that are non-yield bearing themselves, but offer that potential upside. And for RPCFi, and once again, partnering with Anchor to build out this novel mechanism where we're taking one revenue stream of Anchor's RPC service, premium RPCs, and working with the top 10 chains for this service. In this example here, you can see BNB chain. So an application is spending $5,000 a month on BNB chain or for our BNB chain on Anchor's RPC services. That value is bridged to Neura and then split, and half will be purchasing BNB or the token associated with the chain, and the other half for USN. That's kind of sits on an LP on Neura's VE DEX, and the trading fees associated with that reside with Neura, and the rewards actually flow back to the application that's making the initial spend. So kind of like a cashback or buyback that's attractive for them to utilize this service. As I mentioned, this is 5 revenue streams, typically fiat and stable payments that'll be available day one for Neura's mainnet launch. And just one example of creative ways that I think we'll see emerge in tapping these existing revenue streams, especially associated with infrastructure that can bring long-term value and create a strong and stable financial layer for ecosystems. So some key takeaways here for Neura, and also kind of where blockchains are headed here. So I think over the next year in 2026, we'll see hype cycles kind of fade and revenue cycles continue with obviously great products leading the way, ones that actually have product market fit and then are generating revenue themselves. And blockchains as businesses must be sustainable in the long term here, as we're going to see more TradFi and traditional players enter the space as well. And one strategy for that, as I went through, is verticalization and owning more of the stack and not being dependent on other providers. For us, that's being completely cloud resistant. So no AWS, no Google Cloud, no Cloudflare issues. So when those things happen, we're up and running still. We don't have those external dependencies that 95% of Web3 is affected by. So this creates a durable business the same way that you're working with anything for redundancy on the infra side. And lastly, kind of taking this verticalization approach and sovereignty stack for higher performance. And as stables and DeFi matures, we think that bare metal hardware connected by private fiber that's separate from the public internet itself will become that much more vital, not only for performance and not reaching those bottlenecks, but for things like geo-jurisdictional compliance in certain regions that you're able to do at the node level that you otherwise can't as just an L1 network itself. So yeah, excited to see where this goes and not relying solely on emissions and launch. And happy to take any questions as well. Yeah, appreciate it, guys.